couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe getting paid for the thing that I loved to do. And this just moment
Light
of,
bulb.
it was just joy, not even a light bulb quite yet. It was just joy that the thought that somebody would pay for you to do the thing that you love was just mind-boggling to me.
Welcome to season 1 of the Owner's Journal with Kurt Zelch and Jim Henderson. I'm Kurt Zelch, CEO and founder of Leap Business Advisors. Our guest today is Steven Freidkin of Ntiva,
Hello,
also
Kurt.
founder and CEO of the company. This is a new podcast series. This is season 1, so I'll explain what we're doing here. Why does the Owner's Journal exist? Why does Leap Business Advisors exist? I would turn it around on Steven a little bit. Why do CEO peer groups exist, and why do you attend those? I think the reason is, as smart as we all think we are as CEOs, we're smart enough to know what, Steven?
We're smart enough to know when we need more help. And I got to tell you, I was introduced to CEO peer groups now almost 20 years ago from my corporate attorney. And at first I thought to myself, how am I going to have time to do this? Like, what's the return going to be here? And, I put my toe in and then I jumped in head first. And I've been in a multitude of different CEO peer groups ever since, learning and growing along the way. It's amazing the power of a group of folks that you trust, that have had experiences that they can share with you and really help you, and from my perspective, not only know what the right things are to do, but more often than not, the things to avoid and the experiences we can learn from others.
Great. That's a good advertisement for peer groups. And it was an attorney that got you into it 20 years ago, you said?
Yeah, it was 20 years ago, and the first one was Vistage, and I've been in a multitude of them since then.
Great. Well, there's a lot of value in those, and I think there's a lot of value in just hearing what I call in these podcasts, our version of the hero's journey, or your version of the hero's journey. So why don't we start a little bit with the origin story of Ntiva and Steven Freidkin in it as founder. When did this all start, and how'd you get this idea?
Sure. Thanks, Kurt. And if you're classifying me as a hero, I would quickly remove that from this discussion today. Honestly, the heroes have always been the folks that I've worked with, especially in the IT industry and managed services. Some of the best engineers with capes that I've ever seen have been along this ride with me, and it's been just a blast. So, at the core, I would say I was born a geek. I spent the majority of my young days screwing around with everything that I could find that had an on-off switch, taking them apart, sometimes getting them back together, but not always. And needless to say, these hobbies that I started at a very young age, in addition to annoying my parents from time to time when I would break a toaster or something like that, didn't necessarily make me the coolest kid in middle school. And so, also had a little bit struggle socially and found myself skipping out on classes quite a bit and going across the street and spending my time at a CompUSA. And I had done this for a number of years at every opportunity that I could to learn and touch new technology. And one day I happened to be wearing a red shirt and was mistaken for an employee there at CompUSA. I quickly told that customer that I didn't work there, but asked more about his needs, and he shared them with me and asked for advice on whether to get a desktop or laptop. I provided him the advice, and then he quickly asked me if I'd go over to his home to get this set up. I did some quick validation to make sure he wasn't a child molester, and not only was he not one, he was actually the CEO of a very large 15,000 person company. And so I'll never forget it. I went over there, I took the bus, and got over to his house, set this up. Maybe was there for 2 hours, and on my way out, he gave me a check for $75, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe getting paid for the thing that I loved to do. And this just moment,
Light bulb.
it was just joy, not even a light bulb quite yet. It was just joy that the thought that somebody would pay for you to do the thing that you love was just mind-boggling to me. And so I by the time I got back to my parents' house, on the tape-based answering machine was already 2 referrals from other business owners in the area that he referred, asking me to help set up their home technology. So needless to say, I started doing that, and through the course of middle school, we got quite a reasonable following of residential customers, but most of them were involved in a small or even large business. I'd also say that when I was about 14, that same first person that I told you about invited me into his IT department as an intern for the summer. And I jumped on the opportunity. And, 15,000 employees in their IT department at the time, they had 61 full-time people. And I'm there as an intern. And my job was a simple one, and it was to do polling. And all that I was to do is they had 1,000 locations, and each night the information would upload to an AS400 through a modem. And my job in the morning was to go which locations didn't upload, call the locations, and then go through the troubleshooting process of plugging in their modem and sucking their data up to the AS400. I did that for about a day and a half before I got a call up to the executive wing. And I'll never forget this because I went up that elevator, went to a completely physically different part of the building, which was an interesting experience. I walk in and it's the entire C-suite of executives, and they start immediately asking me questions about technology. And I noticed that in their suite, it's a completely physically separate network environment too. And I'm sitting there and I asked the question, like, why are you asking me, right? Like, I don't have the experience. You have all these amazing people downstairs. And they told me, look, we run a big business. It's a family-owned business. And we don't want what we do with our resources to be water cooler conversation. And Kurt, that was the light bulb. It was that moment when I went, I could care less what you're doing with your resources, though I'd love you to invest it a little bit in technology so we could play and do some cool stuff. But at the end of the day, that's not my, I'm not interested in what you're doing there. I'm interested in helping you use the technology to scale, to grow, to do cool things. And so that was the moment where I started to think, I wonder if other businesses would consider outsourcing their technology support if that water cooler conversation wouldn't be part of that discussion. And so that was really the birth in my mind of managed services before managed services was really even a term in the space. And as I continued to grow and develop these residential clients over the years, we started to talk about their companies and I started to get involved in them. Lots of stories there, including some early on engagement in the mortgage industry and both the opportunities and challenges associated with being a specialist in an industry vertical, right? So the need to both do that and market into it, which creates really unique growth and stickiness with a customer. But then also, if you aren't careful and an entire industry like mortgage tanks a few years later, that can also impact you in a major way. So really balancing all that, had many lessons learned that we can get into later. But long story short, as the business continued to scale, this went on for really years, and it was bootstrapped, and we kept generating more and more recurring revenue. And I woke up one day in about 2015, had maybe 80 team members. We were doing about $18 million of revenue. And we got to a point of company size where I couldn't really keep my finger on the pulse of everything that was going on anymore. So I had elevated managers in the company to help kind of keep track of things. And immediately I noticed that there was a different energy inside of the business. The best way I could describe it was before people were running through walls, either because they were following me or I asked them to. And now people were really doing what they needed to do, more of like a 9-to-5 job, keeping the trains running on time. There was no real issues, but it wasn't the energy that I really enjoyed. And what I realized in that moment was I really didn't know why we were growing, whether we should grow, what our intention was. Frankly, I didn't even know why we existed as a company, short of solving the technology problems, right? What do I want to do with this? It had been, nearly 20 years since I started with that person in CompUSA at that point. And so I reflected on that and I challenged myself to take money off the table and ask myself the question, do I want to grow this company or do I want to shrink to 40 people, move to K Street in Washington, D.C., and support law firms in a 3-block radius? And when I took that question and thought about it deeply, I wanted to come back to the moments in my mind that really mattered to me. And there were really 2 experiences that would come up quite a bit. The first was going to like a local networking or philanthropic event, and I'd go and I'd have a tag on my shirt, Steve and Ntiva, and I noticed some people maybe at the bar, and I'd say, oh, I know them. They work for one of our clients, and I'd go introduce myself, say hello, and I'd hear from them, oh, we know Ntiva. Ever since we started using Ntiva, our technology just worked, so we could focus on growing our business. And I would leave those moments just smiling ear to ear, and really have enough energy to run another 2 weeks, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. What would happen even more often is meeting with a new team member. So every new team member that joined, every kind of within 3 to 6 months of them starting, I'd sit down and I'd have coffee or lunch with them. And they would open the meeting with me almost the same way every time. I'd say 90% of the time I'd hear something like, oh, ever since I started working here 90 or 180 days ago, I've learned and grown more than I have in my prior job and or formal education. And that was like, hook me up to a gas tank, fill me up with fuel. I was ready to go for another 2 weeks with that kind of energy that came from that kind of feedback. And what I had learned through all of that is that we had a company that existed to grow people, and technology was just that accelerator. And as soon as that clicked for me, it was clear that I wanted to continue to grow the company to make as much positive impact on growing people as possible. So go ahead, Kurt.
Let me stop you there and ask you, how do you find the right fit when you're recruiting? It's more, for me, it's a interviewing and recruiting question. How do you know you got that person that was 14-year-old Steven Freidkin in CompUSA that just loves to solve problems and loves what they do, versus, let me go get a big paycheck, let me do a project, a technology project where I'll just cash my paycheck at the end and walk away.
Yeah, when we interview for roles, then and now, we're really looking on behaviors of people. Like, what are they passionate about? How do they engage? What kind of culture would they fit into, right? So what are they passionate about? The
Yep.
technical skills, while important to support that, are definitely behind the behavioral components. We can teach the tech. It's the behavior side that is much harder to teach. And if you come with the right passion and dedication and ability to learn, you have, almost unlimited potential. Now, as we've gotten bigger and bigger and jobs are more specific, having those skill sets are important as well. But we built career pathing within the organization to make sure people know what they need to do certain roles and effectively.
So with that, what's table stakes at Ntiva in terms of what you're looking for? If they don't have passion, they're not getting hired. There's skills, right? They have to. There's certain table stakes in terms of skills if it's a specific job. But what are the table stakes that are less skill oriented that you look for and you say, all right, yeah, they're a long-term partner?
Yeah, so that's where our core values come into play. And these core values are a must-have for every team member. And by the way, these were developed shortly after we really honed in on that why of existing to grow each other. So from a very simple perspective, it's care, ownership, responsiveness, and excellence, right? So with each of those, I can go a little bit deeper. And the care is really going the extra mile to humanize what's being done and make sure we're not just checking the box to complete a task. And that's super important, especially in the tech world, right? Like, we really want to engage with our customers on an emotional level and use that as an opportunity to get to know them, which in turn will help us help them use the right technology to grow themselves. And it's this beautiful circle. And then the tech that helped do that is growing as well by being able to implement it. The next idea of ownership It's really, anything that comes to them, whether they can complete it themselves or not, they need to see it to closure. They need to follow up. They need to follow through. It's super important to be successful here to do that. The third is really around responsiveness, right? This is both for everything I'm talking about, by the way, is both internal and external. But responsiveness is critical. Like if you can't be quick to respond to situations, you're not going to make it in this industry, right? There's a lot of clients you're supporting at any one time. If something is going on with one, they want to know you're on it and you've been heard and you're starting to do that work. And then finally, the idea of excellence. It's that idea of doing it right the first time. Doesn't mean mistakes aren't allowed. In fact, we believe in failing fast here, and we call the ability to have original mistakes be very positive. But when the mistakes are being repeated, that is not something that we would tolerate. So going back to excellence, it's that idea of doing it right the first time. If you're going to make a mistake, make it fast, fix it, and fix it permanently.
Can we talk about responsiveness and then we'll close that out, because I love the idea. I love that that's one of your 4 core values. Do you have guardrails or like, are there certain time frames that you say you've got to get back? If someone emails you, you got to get back within this amount of time, or someone asks you a question, you either have to solve or delegate responsibility. Are there certain things that you have built in?
There's structure around that. The larger we got as an organization, the more we had to define what that looked like. But the expectation is, during working hours, let me back up. There are certain roles who are responsible for responding to clients right away, like within minutes. That's their job. They're just tracking inbound requests and dealing with that. So carving those folks out, we're looking really for 2-hour or less response to any emails, text messages, Teams messages, etc. throughout the day. Never more than 24 hours responding to a colleague or a customer, and to go from that 2 to 24 should be the exception, not the rule. We also are believers that if something is urgent, we really ask people to pick up the phone, right? There's a lot of things going on at the same time. So if there's an urgent request and you're not in the same room of one another to tap on each other's shoulders, please pick up the phone and make that call. And the expectation is that your colleagues will be answering those calls above all else to deal with anything that's time sensitive.
Sounds like a great company to work for. That's just something where everyone has the same responsibilities and the same passion for responsiveness here, and it gets built into the culture. And you either like that and you're about that, or you're not, right? So I would imagine, this is something that early on you learn, and then,
yeah, it's interesting. To be very vulnerable with you, I'd say the first 20 years of my career, I spent a lot of time slightly altering myself to whatever audience I was working with. Now, I would never lie, but I would adjust what I share and don't share, or believe in or don't believe in order to be liked by the person on the other end, right? And I had this need to be liked by everyone. What I learned as we scaled, and again, this was a costly lesson because we got to 100+ people before I figured this out in myself, is as the leader of a company, or as the leader of frankly anything, your job is not to be liked by everyone. In fact, the bigger you get, that's impossible. Your job is to be clear, consistent, and in an ideal world, respected, right? So people are going to know what's coming from you, and it's not going to be a surprise. So when it comes to things like responsiveness, that is a place we got, right? Like this is just a core tenet of the business. This is what is expected to be successful here. This means a lot to me for these reasons, and hopefully you agree with this and you're aligned with this, and it means a lot to you too. But if it doesn't, that's okay. This isn't the place for you. And I started to have to get clearer about that. And as much as that hurt me to not be, loved by everyone, what started to happen is the right people started to self-select in, get on the right seats and move in the right direction without as much focus and kind of care and feeding as would have been needed in my prior model of just trying to keep everybody happy with me. And so that combination, I want to go back to that clear purpose of existing to grow people with technology as that accelerator, complemented with those core values, created that very clear vision and really framework of what we're about. And that was my job as the founder and CEO to set that. I was very lucky to do that. And then from that point forward, it was all about finding, growing, and supporting the right people that believe in those same things.
I think you keyed in on something that I'm pretty passionate about, and which is the vision of the CEO needs to be an energizer, right? If the CEO doesn't share their vision early, often, daily, if it doesn't just exude from their pores, right? Sort of the energy in the company is sapped. It just deteriorates.
That's right, 100%. And look, I always had passion and energy for this. I could just, I wasn't, it wasn't until late 2015 that I could name it. Before that, I think, I don't know. I think we had a lot of fun together. We were challenged. A lot of stuff was happening. I was in the trenches with everything going on. And so you sort of like naturally made those connections with people. But the need to scale, the desire to scale, to continue to make the positive impact and fulfill that purpose meant that people need to be able to act autonomously and drive things forward, frankly, without me and my energy being in the room. So being able to set that in a clear way, to define it, to have it so everybody understands it, then what started to happen is these managers started to get clear, started to make autonomous decisions, and that energy that might be, the founder's vision, and I don't want to take a lot of credit for this, ultimately was energy that would exist in the spheres of each of these team members and the groups that they supported. I'll never forget, we got, I don't know how many people we were at the time, maybe 150 people. And I had a colleague that had been with me for more than 12 years at the time. And he comes into my office and he's very distraught. And he looks me in the eye. This is back when people still went into offices, by the way. But he looks me in the eye and he goes, I don't know what's happening to this company. Everything's falling apart. I look around, I walk into the office and there are people here, I don't even know the names. This isn't the way it used to be. Don't you remember how, 3-4 years ago, on Thursday nights, we'd have a drink after work and then we'd go to your house and play Wii, and like the culture is different and I don't know the names of people, like what's going on? And, I looked him right back in the eye and I said, listen, I understand where you're coming from. I hear you loud and clear. I feel these things sometimes too. But you now have your team. How are you creating what you felt was awesome before for the team that you have direct management oversight and leadership over? Like, what are you doing there? And that was an amazing aha moment for him because he didn't realize he had that ability. And he went right out of that room. And, to this day, he runs one of the most culturally aligned, hardworking teams in the organization. And he kept that culture that we had, now 20 plus years ago, and has it in his specific department inside of the company. And he brings this story up to me sometimes and appreciates me for it. And it was actually his 20th anniversary just a couple of weeks ago when we had lunch together. And I told him the part of the story that I never told him, which is the moment that he left my office that day, I just crawled under my desk and like started tearing because I was feeling the same thing that he was feeling in a really deep way. I didn't know all the people. I was afraid we were losing our culture and our focus of that why. And it took me a minute to like reflect on that whole discussion and realize that for me to get my reward, I can't be in all of it. I have to enable the teams to do it on their own. And that was a huge aha moment for me where I had to figure out other, I shared with you earlier how fulfilled I was hearing that feedback from a client or the feedback from a team member after a 90-day check-in lunch or coffee. I had to get comfortable that I wasn't going to get that direct feedback all the time anymore. I had to have different ways to fill my bucket. And I had to give that gift that I had been receiving to my downstream team members that were building their groups and make sure they were able to get that fuel the same way that I did. And once I saw that start to happen and I started to see their tanks get filled, I started to really, be able to have joy on the journey and realize that, I'm not just, sitting behind a screen and manipulating numbers on a spreadsheet.
Man, I got a lot of chills multiple times throughout what you just said. The first chill came, I will share, was when you used the word creating. To me, G.K. Chesterton once said, "Art is the signature of man. Art is the ultimate form of creativity." Right? As humans, if we're not creating, we don't feel like we're alive. We're dying, right? So you turn the tables around on your manager and you said, "You're not feeling fulfilled. Your tank is not filling because you're not creating anything. You don't feel like you're creating the environment that should be fulfilling." I got chills when you said that. I could stay on this topic all day long. But I think that was a struggle that you felt. My next question was going to be about struggle. Tell us a personal struggle that you shared with your team, where they said, "Oh, he's struggling along with us. Let's take him along for the ride. Let's lift Steven up. Let's lift our CEO up by doing more, by creating more." Right? I think you kind of answered the question in that story, but really, really good. You mentioned another thing. Filling the tank was another one. These are just great phrases that I'm just going to use in my daily meetings with clients. But what is it going to take to fill the tank for your team? Well, if you don't feel like they're giving you the vibe of being fulfilled, let's not just call it their problem. Let's not just call it the company's problem. It's not Ntiva's problem. It's my problem, right?
And that's the ownership piece of those core values, by the way.
I love it.
And over the years, the language is so important, right? So you brought up some of these phrases, and there's there's a lot to this. So I'll spare everyone the detail, but from a personal perspective, over the last 10 plus years, I've been on a significant journey of individual growth and development on a psychological level, both to better understand me as well as the people who are closest to me in my life and how I can support them the most. And the deeper I went in that world of psychology, the more I learned how parallel it is to working with the people in frankly any organization. But as it related to Ntiva, once I started to understand how people were wired, I no longer had to change what I was doing or saying, like the underlying message of what I wanted to have them follow along, but rather where I'm getting, right, is like that person who came into my office, and I see it all the time. Like people live in this, and this is just one example from what I've learned from psychology, and I can give you like dozens of these, but just the trauma triangle, if you look, right, like you're always jumping around this trauma triangle.
Everyone's in an emotional whirlwind, is what one of my advisor friends, Dale Gibbons, actually, I give him credit here. He calls it the emotional whirlwind. everyone experiences trauma, and every day you wake up, you're trying to get above the line, the green, or below the line is the red, where you're like, I can't function. I'm in the red, right? I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think that's kind of where you were going with that. Like,
Yeah, it's exactly where I'm going, and I'm worried about time and how all this is going to come together. And we can always do another one of these, by the way, if we need to.
sure.
But that's exactly where I was going, right? Like the deeper I went in my, you know what, just zooming out again, right? Like the beauty of having a company that exists to grow each other, it's not just about the technology and doing it through the technology, right? It's all of the interactions and engagements that you have in life and how you then use that in your day to hopefully help other people in a positive way, in addition to the overall company. Right.
Make it yours.
Yes, and so what we started here was on the topic of ownership and how I was saying how important language is. And one of the things that I learned in that psychological journey, even in how to interact with my spouse, which I've still got a lot of room to improve there. But like it's just the language choices. Like my intention with all of our team was that this is our company. It's not my company. I'm not telling you what to do. You're coming here. You have ownership. You have autonomy. Like live by the purpose and the values, and it's yours. It's ours, right? And over the years, that's just become a natural part of my language. I don't talk about it any other way, and I can see the difference of how important that is to get people on board and really connected. I don't want a company with a bunch of yes people running around that are just showing up for a 9 to 5 position. I want people that really want to make a big impact and grow themselves and those around them. And like we've done, we are not perfect. We are constantly evolving in this journey. And the number one driver for me is the purpose and following those values that I shared with you.
Well said. I think I know time is tight now, and we're coming up on the end of this hour, but I think some of the things I heard that I agree with and that I project in my conversations with other owners is every one of your employees, regardless of their level and their title, want to feel valued. Number one, they want to feel like they have some sort of influence over what's happening at work. They want to feel influential, and they want to feel like they are having an impact with the work that they're doing. And I think if you can tap into those three feelings or emotions, it's all like right up here, right? It's like the limbic system, the front brain, the emotions of am I doing good work? Am I feeling value? Am I influential? Do people like what I'm doing, right? If you can tap into that, the logic part of what we're doing, the skills and the tech and the just the work in general, it's going to happen. It's almost just follows.
And Kurt, I hate to do this. We could probably spend another hour just talking about this, but that is more true now than ever with generative AI and where things are going, right? At the end of the day, what's happening here, as you're describing, is really what we as people need to master and understand, as well as the ability to reference, how to get the right information.
We need them both. We need both parts of the brain. Exactly. We can't live without either one.
Well, fair point. Yeah, we definitely can't live without either one. But I think where I'm getting is the importance to store that knowledge is not going to be as needed going forward. You'll need to be able to reference that knowledge and know how to reference that knowledge. But the ability to understand your emotions and other people's emotions and how to communicate is more and more important.
More value nowadays. I would agree with you. We could go on this topic, but I think that's a great place to close out the meeting, Steven. And I appreciate your time and your insights and the vulnerability at times with the struggles. And let's do this again.